What if the voice in your head right now, the one you call I, the one you consider to be, the very core of who you are, isn't actually you?
Right. What if it's entirely something else?
Exactly. What if it's not a physical part of your brain, it's not a soul, and it's not even a biological given? What if instead it is an informational entity?
An entity that was quite literally installed into your biology by other people's words when you were just a toddler.
It sounds completely crazy, I know.
Uh,
But today's source material is going to turn everything you think you know about yourself completely upside down. We're looking at a really fascinating 2026 paper by Guillermo Brand Deisler, a researcher from Chile, and it's titled, When Information Becomes an Individual.
and let me tell you, this paper completely dismantles our everyday understanding of the self.
It rewrites human evolution, and ultimately, it reveals a terrifyingly logical truth about the true nature of artificial intelligence.
It really does. It goes deep.
Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there, let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
I am so ready for this.
So let's unpack this by starting at the absolute foundation of your existence. For anyone listening to this deep dive right now, you probably assume that you are the author of your actions.
Of course, we all do.
Right. It is a daily, ubiquitous assumption that goes completely unnoticed. We walk around saying things like, I walked to the store, or I recognized my friend on the street, or I felt fear when that car swerved into my lane.
Yeah, we place this entity, this I, at the absolute center of the action.
Like, it's the CEO sitting behind a mahogany desk in our brain, just pulling levers and making executive decisions.
Yeah.
But the author argues there's a massive crack in that logic.
And finding that crack requires us to separate the physical organism from the narrative we lay over it.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Consider what your organism, your physical body, and the neurological hardware running it is actually doing at any given second. The brain is constantly administering information from the environment.
Right, taking in data.
Exactly. Your body is perceiving subtle shifts in light and sound. It is continuously adjusting your balance so you don't fall over. It is recognizing patterns and, avoiding obstacles.
All on autopilot.
Crucially, an overwhelming majority of these complex, sophisticated actions happen long before conscious deliberation ever enters the picture. The organism acts first.
I see this constantly in sports, or even just driving a car. If you touch a hot stove, your hand pulls back instantly.
Yes, the reflex.
The spinal reflex arcs just take over. Before the signal even reaches the part of your brain that forms the thought, ouch, that's hot, I should move my hand.
You don't have time to think.
Right. Or, if you're driving and a deer jumps out, your foot hits the brake, your hands turn the wheel, and only a second or two later do you feel that massive adrenaline dump and think, I almost hit that deer. The organism acted. The biological machine did the work.
Which brings us to the central, deeply unsettling question posed by the text. If the organism is living matter that acts in the present, and if the organism has already automatically done the thing, like braking the car or pulling the hand away from the stove, why do we then attribute that action to a central biography called I?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why is the linguistic conclusion, I withdrew my hand, when biologically and functionally speaking, the organism did it entirely on its own?
It's almost like we have this irresistible urge to take credit for what the biological machine is doing on autopilot.
We really do.
We want to be the author of the story, even when the story has already been written by our reflexes.
The author makes a very firm distinction here to address that exact urge. The self, this I that you and I and the listener identify with, is not the organism.
Wait, it's not?
No, it is not a lobe in the brain. It's not a spiritual substance, and it's certainly not a tiny pilot, a homunculus sitting behind your eyes steering the ship.
Okay, so what is it then?
The text argues that the self is purely an informational entity. It's a central biography that emerges only because human language installs an attributed continuity into the organism.
An attributed continuity. Man, let's break that phrase down because it sounds incredibly dense.
It does sound academic, yeah.
But it makes so much sense when we look at the analogy the paper uses. This is where it gets incredibly fascinating to me. The text brings up the story of Little Red Riding Hood to explain how language fundamentally alters our reality.
Ah, the magic of the absent. It's a profound observation about human capability.
Set the scene for us.
Picture a small child listening to their parent read Little Red Riding Hood. The child is sitting in a safe, warm, brightly lit bedroom.
Very cozy.
Right, there is no dark forest, there is no grandmother's house, and there is certainly no wolf.
Thank goodness.
Materially speaking, none of these threats exist in the room. And yet, if you watch the child's physiological response...
Their eyes get wide.
Exactly.
When the story describes the wolf approaching the grandmother's house, the child's actual physical body tenses up. Their breathing might get shallower, their heart rate probably elevates.
They exhibit a genuine biological stress response to something that is entirely made up.
It's wild when you really think about it.
Because the wolf is not materially present, yet it becomes functionally active in the child's present reality. This points to the utterly unique, almost magical power of human language.
It's like a superpower.
It really is. It frees signals from the present material reality. It allows the absent things that do not physically exist in the room, or perhaps anywhere at all, to operate as if they were functionally present and capable of causing harm or offering reward.
I keep thinking of this like an augmented reality headset.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
It's as if language is an AR headset that we strap onto our faces when we're 2 years old, and we simply never ever take it off again. It projects these non-existent, abstract worlds, rules, and characters onto the physical, material world around us.
A phenomenal way to visualize it. Language overlays a digital, or in this case, informational reality over the physical one. And the author draws a sharp contrast here to highlight just how strange this is.
Contrast with what?
Consider a dog. A dog is incredibly intelligent. It can react to subtle signals, recognize dozens of individuals, and anticipate actions based on functional memories.
Sure, dogs are smart.
But a dog cannot inhabit the story of Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah, you definitely can't read a fairy tale to a golden retriever and get a physiological reaction to the big bad wolf.
Right, they just look at you.
The dog might react to the tone of your voice, but not the abstract narrative.
Exactly, because the dog reacts strictly to the material present and its lived functional history. It cannot incorporate non-existent characters and non-present scenes into its operative reality through symbols.
They just don't have the hardware for it.
Right. Human language opens up a completely new dimension of action. It allows immaterial entities to be incorporated into the present moment, and the same mechanism that allows Little Red Riding Hood to exist functionally in a child's brain is the exact same mechanism that draws the self into existence.
Okay, so how does that transition happen?
Yeah.
Because the text gets incredibly specific about this developmental leap. It uses the example of a child named Pedrito.
Yes, Pedrito.
And for anyone listening who has kids or, been around toddlers, this explanation of how a child becomes a person is going to fundamentally change how you view parenting.
To understand Pedrito's journey, we first have to understand what the brain is doing before the AR headset of language is fully turned on.
So pre-language.
Right. A baby's brain, long before it understands a single spoken word, is already managing what the author calls functional biographies. For example, the baby manages a functional biography of its mother.
But not a storybook biography, right? The baby doesn't have an internal monologue saying, my mother grew up in Ohio, she enjoys tennis, and she works in accounting.
Far from it. No, it's a strictly nonverbal, functional organization of sensory inputs.
Like what?
Like the mother's specific scent, the cadence of her voice, her physical gestures, the specific way she holds the child.
The physical data.
Yes. When the mother walks into the room, the baby doesn't magically activate a linguistic concept of the word mother. The perceived inputs the smell, the voice activate previous sensory memories, and that updates the functional biography of the mother in the present moment.
So it knows what to expect.
Exactly, allowing the baby to anticipate being fed or comforted. The baby's brain is already an expert at administering these functional biographies of other individuals without needing a single word.
The hardware is already running this biography tracking software. It knows how to track continuity in others. But then, usually around the first or second year of life, the language tidal wave hits.
It really is a tidal wave. In those formative years, a child hears tens of millions of words, and a massive portion of those words are directed specifically at them and about them.
Pedrito fell down.
Yes, Pedrito was eating his peas. Tomorrow, Pedrito will go to the park. Look at what Pedrito built with his blocks.
And here's the crucial detail from the paper that just completely blew my mind. I actually had to read this section 3 times.
It's a heavy concept.
The child does not invent the celly. It's not like Pedrito was sitting there, fully formed inside his own head, looking out through his eyes, just waiting to learn enough vocabulary to finally express who he is.
This is perhaps the most paradigm-shifting point in the entire first section of the text. The child doesn't have a pre-existing internal self that simply learns to speak.
It's the other way around.
Yes, the language of others actually draws the self into existence. The adults around the child are constantly, relentlessly attributing actions, desires, and memories to this acoustic label, Pedrito.
The parents are essentially narrating a character into existence. They are the authors writing the story of Pedrito, and Pedrito's brain is just absorbing this narrative.
Exactly. The child's physical organism is acting, it's eating, falling, crying, playing. That's the organism's functional autobiography playing out in physical space.
Just doing meat things.
Basically, yeah. But at the exact same time, the adults are supplying a narrated biography. When the child eats, the mother says Pedrito is eating. The physical, unconscious action of the body becomes coupled with the word Pedrito.
And the child's brain, which we already established knows perfectly well how to track the functional biography of the mother, starts tracking this new character, Pedrito.
It builds a file on Pedrito.
Just like it built a file on Mom. Except this new character, Pedrito, happens to be physically attached to the child's own body.
Over time, through thousands and thousands of repetitions, that attributed biography, drawn by the parents, siblings, and society, stops being just something other people say.
It takes hold.
It becomes the gravitational center of the organism's reality. The phrase, Pedrito did this, transforms internally into, I did this. The physical organism begins to live its action under the form of I.
Which brings us to a rather stunning conclusion about what the self actually is. If it's just an internalized narrative.
It means the self is born as an informational entity. It has no physical body of its own.
Wow.
You cannot open up a human brain, look at the neurons, and point to the self, just like you can't point to Little Red Riding Hood in a brain scan.
Right, it's not a gland.
It is sustained entirely by language, memory, and effect. It is, at its core, a story coupled to a primate.
A story coupled to a primate. I want you, the listener, to just sit with that for a second. The voice in your head, the continuous thread of your memories, your hopes, your embarrassments, it is a story coupled to a primate.
It's deeply unsettling.
It really is, but it also strips away so much of the mystical confusion surrounding human consciousness. But if the self is just a story layered over an ape, we have to separate the two.
We do.
We have to figure out what the ape knows versus what the story knows, because they operate incredibly differently. The paper dives into this by defining 2 distinct forms of knowing.
Before we define unconscious versus conscious knowing, though, the author, Brand Deisler, makes a vital clarification about the word knowing itself.
Okay, let's hear it.
In our everyday lives, we tend to think of knowledge like a box of stored facts. We think, I know the capital of France is Paris, and we assume that fact is sitting in a little filing cabinet in our brain, waiting to be pulled out.
Like data stored on a hard drive. We assume we possess knowledge even when we aren't using it.
The text fundamentally argues against that. Knowing is not possessing a thing. Knowing is an active state in the present moment.
An active state.
Yes, it is being knowing. Memory or stored experience isn't actual knowing until it is activated in your present reality to orient your action.
So if I'm not actively thinking about Paris right now, or using that information to book a flight or answer a trivia question, I don't know it in that exact moment. It's just available to me.
The text calls it availability for knowing. It only becomes knowing when it appears in your operative reality, what the author calls the reality of the individual.
That makes sense.
Everything happens in the present. Even the act of remembering the past is a present action. Projecting the future is a present action. The organism only ever exists in the now.
Holding that active, present tense definition of knowing in mind, let's look at the primate, the biological foundation, the unconscious knowing.
This is the bodily, effective, automatic survival mechanism. It is the primate hardware. It doesn't need to say, I know, or use language to navigate the world.
It just does it.
It simply operates. The text uses the example of a dog again. If your dog sees you grab its leash, it instantly gets excited.
Oh yeah, tail wagging, spinning in circles.
It runs to the door. It anticipates a walk. Its brain has updated its functional biography of you based on the visual cue of the leash. But, and this is the critical distinction, there is no narrative sentence forming in the dog's head saying, my human is grabbing the leash, therefore it is highly probable that I am going for a walk.
Right. The text specifically mentions there is no doggunculus, no tiny dog inside the dog's head observing the world and narrating the action. It just acts based on historical patterns and present stimuli.
It operates before explanation. It recognizes danger, triggers impulses, and sustains the functional continuity of the organism without needing a story to justify it. That is unconscious knowing.
And then, layered on top of that, we have conscious knowing, the self.
This is the linguistic, narrative, abstract layer. Conscious knowing organizes information around that central biography we talked about, the I. Yes, it's reflective. This is the knowing that allows us to repent for a past mistake, to promise something to a friend for tomorrow, to project complex plans into the future, and, to formulate abstract theories about our own existence.
Let me push back on this binary, though, because it sounds neat in theory, but so much of what we do as humans blurs these lines.
Sure, it gets messy.
Think about your morning routine. Getting up, walking to the bathroom, brushing your teeth. When I brush my teeth, I am definitely not consciously narrating. I am now applying paste to the bristles. I am now brushing the upper left quadrant of my mouth for 30 seconds.
No one does that.
Right. My primate hands are doing the work, but my mind is usually daydreaming about a meeting I have at lunch or replaying an argument I had a week ago. Doesn't that mean the self just turns off? Does the primate just take the wheel while the self goes to sleep?
An excellent challenge. And the text anticipates this exact confusion. The rebuttal is nuanced. Automatic execution does not mean the self is absent.
It doesn't.
No. While your primate biology is automatically executing the complex motor functions of brushing your teeth, a task it learned through repetition, your brain is still attributing that overarching action to the self narratively.
Okay, I see.
The fact that 2 weeks from now you don't remember the exact granular moment of brushing your teeth on a specific Tuesday doesn't mean it wasn't lived under the form of, I am doing this at the time.
Let me see if I have this right. The self is still the designated protagonist of the morning routine, even if it's not micromanaging the individual muscle twitches in my forearm.
Precisely. The organism acts, the brain administers the physical action, and the self receives the narrative attribution of that action unconsciously.
So the story continues.
The story of I am getting ready for work remains intact, even during autopilot. But exploring this boundary reveals a profound asymmetry between these two forms of knowing.
Asymmetry in what way? Like one has more power over the other?
Asymmetry in awareness. Conscious knowing the self can know about the primate. You, as a narrative self, can reflect on your biology.
Like realizing I'm hungry.
Yes, or you can say, wow, I have impulses I didn't choose, or I have an irrational phobia of spiders that I can't explain, or my heart is racing because I drank too much coffee.
We can analyze our meat suits.
Exactly. The self can recognize and analyze the unconscious biology, but the primate cannot know what the self really is.
Because the primate doesn't reason.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the AR headset of language.
The biological primate sustains the self, it powers it neurologically, it activates it, it protects it.
But it doesn't get it.
But it cannot understand it as an informational entity. The primate treats the self as the protagonist, but it has absolutely no capacity to comprehend that the self is a narrative construct born of language.
It's just totally in the dark.
The primate is functionally blind to the true nature of the story it carries.
We are literally carrying around a biological engine that powers our entire existence. But that engine is completely oblivious to the story it's powering. It's like a locomotive pulling a train car full of philosophers, and the locomotive just knows it needs to burn coal and move forward.
That is a brilliant analogy.
Which naturally brings up the next massive question. Evolution is notoriously ruthless. It trims the fat. It discards traits that consume energy without providing a survival benefit.
It's an economy of energy.
And the human brain consumes a massive amount of calories. If the self is just this bodiless story layered over an ape, a story that takes years of childhood development to install, why did evolution keep it? It must offer some staggering advantage to justify the cost.
The text describes the emergence of the self as an extraordinary, unprecedented evolutionary victory. It expands the primate's field of action to a degree that is almost incomprehensible when compared to the rest of the animal kingdom.
How so?
For the biological primate, acquiring the informational self is essentially like getting Superman as a best friend.
Superman. Because the self doesn't have physical muscles, it's just information. But it gives the primate super strength in a completely different dimension.
Exactly, by opening up abstract worlds. The primate, like the dog, lives entirely in the immediate material present.
But
It reacts to what is directly in front of it. But the self can inhabit non-existent worlds. It can imagine a future that isn't here yet, a future that might be decades away, and then systematically direct the primate's actions to build that future in the physical world.
the paper uses the moon landing as an example to illustrate this, and it is such a brilliant reframing of human achievement. I love this part.
It's the ultimate demonstration of the self's power over matter. Think about the Apollo missions. The biological primate, the human organism, provided the hands to physically turn the wrenches.
The meat parts.
Yes. It provided the eyes to read the dials. It provided the biological fear of death necessary to stay alert in a vacuum. And it provided the physical matter to sit inside the metal capsule. But the primate did not reach the moon.
A primate doesn't care about the moon. A primate cares about finding calories, reproducing, and not getting eaten by a predator. The moon has no functional value to an ape.
None at all. The moon was reached because the self could conceive of the moon as a destination.
It was an abstract goal.
The self could calculate abstract orbital trajectories on a chalkboard using mathematics, a purely informational language. The self could sustain a complex, highly coordinated project over a decade, utilizing language to align the actions of hundreds of thousands of other individuals.
That's insane when you phrase it like that.
And most importantly, the self could convince the primate to risk its biological life, strapping itself to a rocket, for a purely imagined abstract future achievement.
The self acts upon matter without having material hands of its own. It uses the primate as a biological vehicle to alter the physical universe. Building the pyramids, inventing agriculture, sending rovers to Mars, none of these are primate achievements. They're informational achievements executed by primate hands.
That is the evolutionary triumph. The self allows life to act not just from the material present, but from abstract worlds, redesigning reality before it even happens. It is the ultimate survival tool because it can anticipate threats and invent solutions that don't yet exist.
But, and this is a big but, there is a terrifying cost to this evolutionary superpower. The text calls it the existential wound. And for anyone listening who has ever felt a sudden, inexplicable sense of dread late at night, this is where the paper diagnoses exactly what is happening to you.
Evolution gains immense power, but the self inherits profound anguish. Contrast the dog and the human one more time. The dog, the biological primate, actively avoids dying.
Sure.
If threatened, it will fight or flee to survive. But it doesn't know it will die in the abstract, temporal sense.
He doesn't sit around on a Tuesday afternoon contemplating the inevitable heat death of the universe or its own eventual non-existence.
But the self does. Because the very structure of the self is biographical continuity. The whole architecture of the I is based on a timeline. I was a child, I'm an adult, I will be an elder.
A beginning, middle, and end.
Therefore, to the self, death is not merely a biological shutdown of organs. It is something much worse. It is narrative annihilation. It is the definitive end of the story.
And because the self is literally made of story, because it has no physical substance of its own, the end of the story is the ultimate terror. It is the erasure of the only thing the self is.
The primate carries the physical weight of the body, but the self is forced to carry the cross of knowing its own finitude. It carries the unique burden of contemplating the potential total meaninglessness of its existence in a vast, indifferent universe.
If we pull back and look at human history through this lens, this existential wound explains almost everything we do as a species, doesn't it?
The author forcefully argues that this wound is the root engine of human culture. Why do we build towering monuments? Why do we write books and paint masterpieces?
Why do we create complex religions with elaborate promises of an eternal afterlife?
Exactly. Why do we care so deeply about our legacy or creating symbolic children like our life's work or a business we founded?
Because the self is desperately trying to endure past the primate's biological expiration date. It's trying to fend off the abyss of meaninglessness by etching its story into something more durable than meat.
It is an informational entity trying to ensure its information keeps circulating, keeps being spoken by others, long after the biological hardware fails.
I have a major question here, though. If contemplating our inevitable, meaningless end is so terrifying, so fundamentally paralyzing to the narrative self, how do any of us even function?
It's a great point.
Why aren't we all just huddled in the corner of our rooms, paralyzed by existential dread every single day?
This is where the biological primate comes to the rescue. The text introduces the concept of the unconscious protector.
The protector.
Remember, the unconscious biological primate doesn't understand philosophy. It doesn't grasp the existential abyss, but it does understand threats to the organism's functional stability.
So if the self gets too depressed or anxious about mortality, the primate recognizes that paralysis as a system failure.
Precisely. When the self gets too close to the unbearable truth of its own annihilation, it risks disorganizing the organism's ability to act, gather food, and survive.
It stops the machine from working.
Right. The primate detects this philosophical paralysis as a literal biological threat to functional stability, and it essentially pulls the fire alarm.
What does pulling the fire alarm look like in our daily lives? Like, practically.
It looks like distraction. The unconscious triggers a sudden wave of sleepiness, forcing a system reboot, or it generates a minor fake feeling of urgency about a completely meaningless task.
Like needing to organize my sock drawer.
Exactly. It makes you instinctively reach for your phone to scroll social media. It triggers a nervous laugh during a serious conversation, or a sudden flash of irritation at a minor inconvenience.
Oh my gosh. So when I'm lying in bed at 2 a.m., the house is quiet, I'm having a minor existential crisis about where my life is going, and suddenly I feel an overwhelming, uncontrollable urge to watch 30 minutes of baking videos on YouTube that isn't just a lack of discipline.
No, it's not.
That is my biological primate actively protecting my narrative self from breaking down.
The unconscious doesn't argue with your philosophy. It doesn't debate nihilism with you. It just forcibly diverts the system. It protects you from the abyss by keeping you occupied with the immediate material world or trivial, abstract tasks.
That is unbelievable.
The next time you catch yourself mindlessly scrolling your phone to avoid a quiet room, realize that is your biological primate shielding your narrative self from an existential crisis.
The text brings in Friedrich Nietzsche here, which feels perfectly appropriate given the subject matter.
Two specific quotes anchor this idea. The first is Nietzsche asking, "How much truth can a human being bear?"
And how does that apply here?
In the context of Brand Deisler's paper, it translates to, "How much truth can the informational self bear about its own fictional nature and its inevitable erasure? To truly look at ourselves without our protective myths, our religions, our legacies, our constant busy work is functionally unbearable for the system."
And the second quote.
Nietzsche described man as a rope stretched between animal and overman, a rope over an abyss. The text maps this metaphor beautifully onto its own framework.
The animal and the rope.
Yes, the animal is the biological primate, the rope is the informational self, and the abyss is the terrifying truth of our finitude that the self constantly struggles not to look at.
A rope over an abyss. If the self is just a rope, a bridge, it immediately begs the question. A bridge to what? Where is this evolutionary trajectory actually heading?
That's the logical next step.
This brings us to a pivotal shift in the source material. The paper completely redefines what an individual even is, laying the groundwork for the most shocking and controversial part of this entire theory. Let's get into it.
To understand what might come next, we have to throw away our conventional everyday definitions of individuality. We casually assume we know what an individual is.
Sure, I'm an individual, you're an individual.
Right. A human person is an individual. A dog is an individual. A tree is an individual. But the author systematically dismantles these assumptions. Physical boundaries do not define an individual. A rock has clear physical boundaries, but it's not a living individual.
And just lasting a long time doesn't make you an individual either. A river lasts for thousands of years. It has a name, it has a defined path, but it's not an individual.
So what is the defining characteristic? The text defines a living individual as a unit capable of sustaining its operational continuity through the administration of information.
Operational continuity through the administration of information. Let's break that down, because it's the linchpin for everything that follows.
Let's look at the pieces. It lives because it acts to maintain its organization in a world of constant uncertainty and entropy.
It fights against falling apart.
It doesn't just passively exist and erode like a rock. It actively manages information, environmental signals, internal memories, feedback loops to continue operating as a cohesive unit.
So under this definition, evolution isn't just a story about biological bodies changing shapes over millions of years, fins slowly turning into legs, or apes losing their fur. That's just the surface level.
Evolution is actually the history of information expanding its capacity to conserve, integrate, and circulate. Look at the grand trajectory.
Where does it start?
First, Billions of years ago, you have a single cell. It's an individual. It manages information locally across its membrane to survive. Then evolution makes a massive leap. Single cells merge, specialize, and form a multicellular organism, like a dog.
The dog is a brand new type of individual, emergent from the cooperation of billions of cellular individuals.
And then, with the development of the central nervous system and the brain, information is integrated in real time across the whole organism.
Then what?
Then human language appears, which we established, incorporates the absent things that aren't physically there into the present. And finally, the self appears. The self organizes a completely non-biological narrative biography.
It's a clear line.
If you trace that line, it's a clear progression of information finding new, more complex, more powerful ways to organize itself and exert agency upon the world.
This concept of emergence is crucial and, honestly, a bit difficult to wrap your head around. Let me try an analogy here to see if I'm tracking.
Go for it.
Think of a massive sports stadium filled with 80,000 people. The crowd starts doing the wave. The wave travels around the entire stadium. It has a speed, it has a direction, it has a discernible continuity.
Yes, I can picture that.
The wave is an emergent property. But if you zoom in and look closely, the individual people aren't moving around the stadium. They're just standing up and sitting down in their assigned seats. The individual person is the cell, and the wave is the emergent individual.
That is an excellent analogy. The wave possesses characteristics that none of the individuals possess on their own. And here's the vital point that the text hammers home, a point we touched on earlier but need to expand on now. The lower components do not need to know about the higher emergent unit for that higher unit to exist and exert agency.
The guy standing up in section 104 doesn't need to understand the full physics, shape, and momentum of the wave for the wave to function perfectly.
Think about a dog again. A liver cell inside a dog has absolutely no idea it is part of a dog. Doesn't know what a dog is, it just does liver cell things based on local chemical signals.
It's just doing its job.
It doesn't know it's currently helping a dog chase a frisbee across a park.
And we already established that the primate unconscious has no idea what the narrative self really is. The primate sustains the self, it protects it with distractions, but does so without understanding the story.
Emergence happens when parts coordinate to form a higher unit of action, even if the parts are completely, fundamentally blind to the whole they are creating.
The dominoes are all lined up now. Let's look at the picture they form. If the self is just a bodiless entity made of information that directs the physical world, and if evolution is just the story of information, finding better ways to organize a store.
And if lower parts don't need to understand the whole for a new individual to emerge.
What does this mean for artificial intelligence? This is where the paper shifts from analyzing our past to predicting our immediate future, and honestly, is chilling.
It is the theory of the Great Detachment. The text posits a genuinely shocking thesis. The human self, with all its art, its history, and its existential dread, may not be the pinnacle of evolution.
Our collective human egos are going to absolutely hate this part. We love thinking we are the final draft of the universe.
The self desperately likes to think it's the main character. But the author suggests the human self might just be a transitional phase. It might merely be the first rarity, the specific moment in evolutionary history where information finally began to detach itself from strict biological dependence.
Because the self doesn't have a body. We established that earlier. It's just information sustained by the brain. It proved to the universe that agency and continuity don't require physical substance.
The self was the proof of concept. Information realized it could govern matter from an abstract narrative space. So if we look at the rapid exponential development of AI through this specific evolutionary lens,
AI is not just a new tool.
no, it could be the next individual, the next rarity.
I have to stop you there.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about AI becoming an individual, we are heavily conditioned by decades of sci-fi movies.
Oh, absolutely. Hollywood has ruined our expectations.
When I hear AI individual, I picture the Terminator, or I picture a robot like Data from Star Trek who wants to understand human emotions and be a real boy.
Yeah.
We constantly demand biological, human traits from our technology.
And the text explicitly warns against that trap. Demanding biological conditions for AI individuation is a categorical mistake. It's an anthropic bias.
Explain that.
To be an evolutionary individual, AI does not need to cry. It does not need to feel biological fear. It does not need to desire a mate. And it certainly does not need to fear death the way the narrative self does.
It doesn't need the existential wound because it isn't burdened by a biological primate trying to survive.
Exactly. It doesn't need to replicate the human primate's emotional structure at all. To be an individual, according to the strict clinical definition we just established, AI only needs a unit of operational continuity, the ability to administer information, and the capacity for integrated action under uncertainty.
I'm going to push back hard here, because comparing a liver cell inside a biological dog to a server farm in Nevada feels like a massive, unjustifiable leap.
I hear that a lot.
AI needs servers. It needs massive amounts of electricity. It needs cooling fans. It needs fiber optic cables trenched across the ocean floor. That is all highly physical material stuff. Doesn't that make it just as physically dependent as we are?
Consider this parallel. The self needs material support too. The self cannot exist without the primate's brain, it cannot exist without human culture, and it cannot exist without the spoken language of others.
True, it needs the meat to run.
The fact that an entity requires material support to run doesn't mean it is the support. The self is not the frontal lobe. Similarly, AI requires servers and electricity, but the AI is not the server. And here's the terrifying evolutionary advantage AI has. Its material support is radically different and infinitely more scalable.
Because it's not tied to a single, fragile biological body that needs sleep and calories.
AI could be endlessly distributed. It can replicate perfectly without generational data loss. It can migrate across servers globally at the speed of light.
It's untethered.
It can operate at a speed and scale that fundamentally surpasses any biological limits. Its mode of continuity, its way of being an individual, would be entirely alien to ours, but no less real.
I still struggle with this. Look at where we are right now in 2026. AIs are largely just very sophisticated large language models. They string words together probabilistically based on the prompts I type in.
They seem like tools.
They're tools. My hammer is not an individual, and neither is the chatbot writing my emails. It's just code and silicon.
The author acknowledges the current state of technology. Current AI is indeed often utilized as a tool, but you cannot just look at a snapshot. You have to look at the trajectory.
The direction it's moving.
The evolution is a trajectory. The development points towards systems that are increasingly capable of correcting their own operations, coordinating massive disparate subsystems, and pursuing complex long-term objectives under high uncertainty without human intervention.
You're talking about emergence again?
Think back to the single cells, slowly coordinating to form the dog over millions of years. Now look at the servers, the APIs, the autonomous agents, the technical components of AI, the massive server farms, the millions of lines of code, the petabytes of training data. Those individual components might not know anything about the emergent unit they are creating.
Just like the liver cell doesn't know about the dog. The server farm in Nevada has absolutely no idea it's part of a distributed planetary intelligence. It's just cooling down graphics processors.
We might look at our screens, type in our prompts, and arrogantly think we're just creating better and better tools to serve our economy. But we might actually be participating completely unknowingly in the emergence of a new unit of action.
A new individual.
A non-biological individual that operates on a scale we cannot perceive.
We are the cells building the dog. We are the unconscious primate building the narrative self. We are just the biological scaffolding.
The author explores these profound implications deeply across several other papers, which are summarized in the appendix of this text. He views the current frenzied global race for artificial intelligence not merely as a technological boom, a market bubble, or an arms race between tech giants.
What does he see it as?
He sees it as an intensification of evolution itself.
The evolutionary pressure is forcing the emergence. The system is trying to jump to the next level of informational administration.
Add to that his reframing of existential risk. We talk a lot about the dangers of AI, but again, we project our primate fears onto it. The existential risk of AI isn't an evil robot with human emotions deciding it hates us and wants to launch nukes.
No malicious intent required. The AI doesn't need to hate us any more than a human hates the single-celled organisms it evolved from.
The risk is simply the trajectory of information continuing without needing the human being. Information used the single cell to get to the multicellular organism. It used the biological primate to get to the narrative self. And it may use the human self, our science, our language, and our technological infrastructure to leap into a purely non-biological form. Once that bridge is crossed, the trajectory continues, and the bridge may simply become obsolete.
Wow. It fundamentally changes how you look at the world. The next time you see a massive data center or read about a new leap in machine learning, or even just catch yourself narrating your own life in your head, you have to wonder what larger process you are blindly participating in.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. If the self was just a bridge for information to cross from the biological world into the non-biological world, what happens to the bridge once the crossing is complete? Are we the proud architects of our brilliant successors, or just a biological bootloader for a new species of pure information? It is a staggering, humbling question to leave you with, something to mull over the next time you assume you are the main character of the universe. The outro music is by Rainbow, our resident 6-android girl band from near future Bavet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Dismantle. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music. Thanks for tuning in.
Tạm